Honey Sound Broadcasting, an affiliate of the Bilko Media Network.
All right, one of my historically favorite topics, Grand Theft Auto. Let's back up all the way. What Grand Theft Auto games have you played, and when did you start playing them? Wow, an interesting. So Grand Theft Auto 5 has been your intro to this world. Okay, so that's interesting. So this is the first Grand Theft Auto you've ever played. So my history with the franchise has been a lot more in depth than that. So let me kind of give you a lowdown of the franchise itself, and then we can jump into the game. So Grand Theft Auto 1 came out in like early 90s for, I want to say, PC. It was a top-down thing where you just kind of ran around the city to avoid cops. Like there was no storyline, there was nothing beyond that. I mean, it was a basic simple game. 2D graphics, I mean, this is the 90s. So at the very heart where Grand Theft Auto 1 came from, there was nothing there. Grand Theft Auto 2 is essentially the exact same game, but it took place in like London, I think. But it was the same thing. And I don't even know if it was actually released in the US when it came out. I always thought it was like a foreign thing. And it was the same kind of thing, no storyline, no nothing, blah, 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 blah. A basic, forgettable game. Grand Theft Auto 3 came out for the PS2. Grand Theft Auto 3 made a splash because it was like the first open world type of game. Nobody's ever seen that before, where you can choose which missions you do. I mean, you had games like Zelda that came out a few years earlier. You think of like Ocarina of Time. That was kind of open world, but you still had to follow the same main story. There were no like side missions and all that. This was the first one to kind of incorporate that. Yes, it was the first kind of game to really do that. Took place in New York, same as Grand Theft Auto 1. It was a decent game. People enjoyed it. Now, not many people got it. It wasn't that popular of a game, but people liked it. That made the publisher to come out with Grand Theft Auto Vice City 2 years later. That took place in Miami, a much more bigger world than the first one, because the first Grand Theft Auto 3 was kind of condensed. It wasn't that big of a world, but it set the platform for how the sequel should be played. And so Grand Theft Auto Vice City in Miami took it to the next level. Much more interaction, much more detailed storyline, much grander missions. I mean, it was basically Scarface, the video game, mixed in with like the mafia and all these story. To me, Vice City had the best storyline of any game in the Grand Theft Auto franchise. 2 years after that, they released San Andreas, and that's the big one that everybody had because they just stepped it up again tenfold from Vice City. The world was like 10 times as big. They had much more better AI. They had a lot more things you could do in the world that were open-ended. Like you said, you could fly Harrier jets. You couldn't fly anything in Vice City. So you could fly planes. You could steal a train if you wanted to. You can mod your car with like the lowriders with different paint jobs, and they had all this other stuff. Yeah, you got fat if you ate too much food. They packed so much into San Andreas. That's the one everybody got because that was the most popular game to get on PS2. And to me, that's still like the gold standard of Grand Theft Auto. San Andreas is like the top bar. Then you move to a new platform. You have Grand Theft Auto 4 come out. It looked amazing. The graphics were mind-boggling of how realistic they were. Took place in New York again, just like Grand Theft Auto 3. So it was kind of a retelling of that story, but they introduced this other character who was a foreigner, and it was kind of unrelatable because he was like a Eastern European who came over, and the whole storyline was a mess, I thought, and it didn't really know what you were doing, and even the city layout was all cockamamie and weird, and I just flat out didn't like it, to be honest. So Grand Theft Auto 4, I thought, missed the mark completely. Like San Andreas, set the bar so high that Grand Theft Auto 4, it's back to where Grand Theft Auto 3 was to me. And Grand Theft Auto 3 wasn't even that good overall. I mean, it was decent and playable, but looking back and comparing it to Vice City or San Andreas, like different league, no comparison. Then the trailer dropped for Grand Theft Auto 5, and I'm like, oh my god, here we go. I really hope they fix everything wrong with Grand Theft Auto 4. Because a lot of people didn't like 4 because it was so limited. I mean, you couldn't mod cars, you couldn't fly planes, you couldn't do any of this stuff that they introduced in San Andreas. It was very, very limited. They took out so much stuff, and it was almost like they stepped way, way back because it almost became just missions where you only did like the main story missions and a couple side jobs of like rampages and stuff like that. But they fully pulled back in the progress they made in San Andreas in 4. But then when the trailer dropped for 5, oh my God, here's this massive, massive world that's I think 3 times bigger than San Andreas was. That's replaying San Andreas because they keep going back to the replaying of where they've been before for the new platforms. So now you have this like statewide is what they're saying. Well, that was what San Andreas was too because you had the 3 main cities. This was, I guess, obviously California, much more open world. Yeah. So then you had this trailer drop, and I'm like, my God, thank you for actually making a new game for Grand Theft Auto. And it sure to me looked like you are going to step the bar up again from where San Andreas was. So I went out Black Friday after that trailer drop. I bought myself a PS3, knowing that Grand Theft Auto was right around the corner because they just released the trailer. I found a heck of a deal for $187 at Target, where at the time PS3s were going for I think like $400 or $500, and so I bought this PS3 specifically knowing Grand Theft Auto 5 was coming out, and ended up taking about 2 years afterwards for it to actually drop and come out. But that's why I bought my PS3 anyway, was to play Grand Theft Auto 5. So that kind of leads us into the game itself, which I'll turn over to you to share your thoughts. Right, because you're playing this on a PS4, so you're playing this in like full 4K. Yep. So I played it on PS3 obviously when it first came out. The graphics to me were good. Don't get me wrong. They really touted the graphics as a strong point, and it certainly was. I've never seen it on a PS4 or in 4K, but I've seen screenshots. And I mean, like you said, it's to the point where it's hard to tell the real thing from the game. Yeah, you can't just glance at it and determine, oh, that's a video game. So let's talk story first. The overarching story. This game kind of departed from the original setup where you're this one guy who goes on this like adventure. Because usually what happens is you're just lonely nobody who works his way up in the underworld to become like the head guru, and you go on these elaborate missions to like rob banks or take out the FBI or do all this weird stuff to become like the head mob godfather, if you will, of this Grand Theft Auto world. This game kind of departed from that, where you now have these 3 people you play as, and the whole concept of these heists, that's new to this game too. So they never had that before either from a heist standpoint. It was always these like mission after mission after mission after mission. The heist in this game, it seems like it built it up where you had to do like these side missions, and you even had some freedom of choice as well that led up to like a main heist of, I guess, robbing something. Yes, that would be a big complaint of mine too, is like I felt like there were only like 3 or 4 heists in the game. Yeah, like really made a difference. Yeah. So when you ask me what I think of the story, I think they dropped the ball because I'm used to Grand Theft Auto. Like if you think of San Andreas, which I still say is set the bar. I mean that's the golden standard for me is Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. You had story intertwined with missions, and the missions in that game just never seemed to end. Like you'd play mission after mission after mission after mission and progress through the story, progress through the story, progress through the story, and it felt like an enormous game, which I love because I feel like in Grand Theft Auto 4, I felt like I was cut short, and in Grand Theft Auto 5, I felt I was cut short because, you know, the whole point of 5 is to do these heists, but there's only like 4 of them, and I felt like there's a lot of these like preparing missions, but it's like I felt like the gameplay of the main story in this game felt way shorter than it should have been for this kind of game. But the heists themselves I thought were good. That's like classic Grand Theft Auto type of stuff when you actually got to do the heists. Yes. Yeah, you got to prepare, do your stuff. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I really like that aspect of it. However, I still think they dropped the ball in doing this somehow because it just felt like you said it felt so canned. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you think about like Trevor, like his whole character is this obnoxious, over the top person just for the sake of being extreme, and I just felt like I didn't need that. Yes, I get. Yeah, I didn't like him as a character either, but I found myself playing as him usually with him in a suit, which I thought suited him well, pun intended. Right. So that, I mean, like I said, I didn't like him as a character, but I always found myself playing as him amongst the three, just because, like you said, in the context of playing Grand Theft Auto, he like personifies that gameplay. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like half the people I talk to about Grand Theft Auto, they never even play the storyline. They say, oh, I never played the missions. I play it just to cause chaos and wreak havoc on the world, and that's what's enjoyable for me. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But historically, until PS3, Grand Theft Auto storylines, I loved playing through the story of somewhat of three, certainly Vice City, which I think has the strongest storyline again, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I love the missions, but I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who never even bothered with the missions and just went straight for chaos and destruction. Which, if you like that, fine. Don't get me wrong. I like doing it too. I also just like the missions on the side. But in 5 and in 4, all the missions seem to like blur together and like it's just a rehash of the same thing. It never took it to that next level. Yeah. Maybe that's just me coming from a historical, playing through them all. And maybe that's why I didn't like them as much, because I did not like the play between the three characters. I wanted just to stick with one guy, and that's my guy. I didn't like the hopping around between the three. I thought that was weird. I'll give them that. Like they're trying something new. I kind of felt it fell flat, and I didn't. Like I said, I didn't really care halfway through. I'm like, I'm always just gonna play with Trevor when I can, because that's who I want to play with, even though I don't even like this guy that much. It's just that the other two characters are just so dull and boring, and like the guy from the ghetto is like a rehash of CJ from San Andreas, but he's not as cool as CJ was. Or you had like Tony Soprano as Tony Soprano, and it's like, he's not as good as Tony Soprano. So it's like, who's left? Trevor. And I don't even like this guy that much, but he's kind of crazy, so he's the best, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, Tony Soprano in video game mode. Yes. I don't even remember Tony Soprano's name in this game. I just call him Tony Soprano because that's obviously who they're mimicking. But they just fall so short of hitting that mark. Yeah. Oh, this game took, when did it come out? 2013? It came out in 2013. I think they announced it somewhere around 2008. So do the math. That's like 5 years. Put that in perspective. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas took 2. Right. What did you do? Because the trailer dropped, like I said, when I bought my PS3 in Black Friday of 2011. The trailer released. Oh, Grand Theft Auto coming soon. It's another 2 years before it actually came out. Like, what's going on? And if you watch the credits, I assume you beat the game. I just remember the credits never ending, and it was just people after people after people after people. I'm like, what do these people do the whole time? I mean, the game was large, I'll give them that, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people were involved with this thing. And I'm like, what? What do these people do? No, then that was another thing too. Like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, like if you walk up to people on the street, you can actually have a conversation with them. Like you can choose what to say, and then they can respond based on what you say. Yeah, like you can walk up to people, and if you push like triangle, that's like a negative response. Or if you push like circle, you'll like agree with them. You could have actual conversations with people. And that was completely removed in 4 and 5. And it was like, what? Why do they keep going backwards? And you think of like customization, like you had a little bit of that in 5, but I don't think it was as fun. Like there were no garages, were hard to come by to save your cars. Like there was like one in the whole, like, yeah, exactly. Like they just, it was so weird. Like, and all the even the cars, like, I don't know what you are with cars. Like, I like watching Top Gear. I like car design. I like cars themselves. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas had a lot of cars, like different kinds of cars, exotic cars, all kinds of different designs and stuff. Even Vice City did. But once you got to 4 and once you got to even 5, they all looked the same. Every car was just like the last one. And even the controls were off. I felt like it was very like slippy slidey, like you're driving a boat. But in 5, I found myself always defaulting to that Tesla because that was far and above the best car in the game. Yes, yeah, it was always a pain. And that was another thing, like in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, you know where you can go to get a certain car because the guy at this house owns a Lamborghini, and I know that I can always go to this house and get a Lamborghini. In 5, it was completely random. You never knew where any cars were at any given time. And so my strategy of always having that certain car on standby, and I know if I'm in a certain area and I need a car, I can always go to this guy's house and steal it. That was completely removed from 5. And it's like, I can't even find the cars I want to drive anymore. Yep. Yeah, I mean, they kind of had like the clothing store, but that was like far and removed. It was kind of tedious. Yes, they did have that, and I really like that aspect to it. I also felt like there were too few of them. Yeah, there were only certain buildings you can actually walk into. For if they were to do this game right, you should be able to walk into every store or whatever, and they would sell you stuff. Whereas in this one, I felt like the options were too limited. Like there were like 3 clothing stores, and they were just like multiplied of the same 3 across the state. And again, I feel like they were removing options. Whereas in a game like this, you want more choice, you want more customization. But I just felt like everything was so limited. I mean, that goes back to story arc of the other games, because if you think of like San Andreas, you're just born in the ghetto and you're just this like nobody, and your first mission is to like go in and like rob a Chick-fil-A or whatever it's called, Clucking Bell, or something like that, or something simple to get you used to the game mechanics. Then you have a mission to go work out so you understand like how you don't get fat and stuff like that. Then there's a mission on car driving, so you get the mechanics of that. There's a mission on how to ride a bike. It builds you up, and over time the missions become more and more complex until you get to the one where you're like stealing a Harrier jet off of a aircraft carrier, and it's like you don't start with the stealing of the jet. And I feel like that's what happened in 5, is they start you off so strong, you're kind of thrown off your game. Yeah, that you don't know any of that. You don't even know where you are. You're like, I thought I was playing in San Andreas. Right. Yeah, the cartoony physics, like I remember just taking a car and running like straight up a cliff, and it's like, what? You can't do this. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, like everything, they try to make everything like humorous, but it didn't work for me. Yeah, I think they really missed the mark on the radio too, and that's a whole nother aspect that used to be huge in the other games. Was even in Grand Theft Auto 3 had a great set of radio stations. Nobody's ever even done that before. That was the first time that they did that, and it only had like 5 stations, but they were all good, and the social commentary that happened on the station were entertaining and engaging. Same thing with San Andreas and Vice City. Like the radio stations were just top notch, amazingly well done. By the time you get to 5 and the time you get to 4, even the radio stations, they were just too many of them. There were like 30 of them in the game, and they're all of them are generic. All of them to me were boring. The talk shows, which used to be a strong point in the old games, they just fell flat, and not, they just missed their mark so much in trying to be that all funny thing, I guess, on a social commentary of modern life. But it didn't work for me. And that was the other thing too. Like in this game, you got 1 star, the cops were on you. Like, I don't know if you noticed that, but even if you got to 2 stars, like they'd be ramming you left and right and trying to knock you out and shoot at you. Whereas that's like a 5-star thing in like San Andreas in the earlier ones, and I just felt like the star ratings were just way too intense. Yes, but I still feel they went backwards from where they went to San Andreas, because even in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, you could at least steal the train, and it's like you can't even steal the train in this game. What's wrong with you people? How easy is that to do? Train goes forward, train goes backwards. It's not like it took any extra effort for you to be able to steal the train. And like the planes, I felt were limited. It was near impossible to like steal even a jet from like the army base, and there wasn't even a mission around that. Like like I said, in San Andreas, one of the missions is you actually steal that Harrier jet, and that's how it ends up in your base, because you steal that in a mission. In the game, you don't even do anything with the army bases at all. And I felt like they had this grand plan to do all these elaborate missions, but they just ran out of time. And you think of like all the various elements of that world that seem like, oh, that's going to be a feature mission. Climb the mountain or do this in this little town, but you never go there for any purpose. Yeah. I mean, even from like the rampaging perspective, I still think there's just something missing that was lost from San Andreas. I don't know what that is, but rampaging around in San Andreas was far more fun and entertaining than in 5. Yeah, I probably was about halfway through like the main story, and then I just stopped playing it because I didn't care anymore. Like the storyline was uninteresting to me halfway through, and all these characters were just rehashes of other people. discount China plagiarized ripoff version of it. And I just didn't care. And it wasn't until like a year later that I forced myself to pick it up and finish it because I knew I wanted to finish it at some point. So overall for me, like I think this game really missed the mark. And it certainly didn't meet my expectations of what I was hoping for when I first saw that trailer. Where they're going next in the Grand Theft Auto 6, I mean, maybe they'll fix this stuff, but now that they screwed up 2 games in a row, I think they're at the point of no return, of returning to the glory days that was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, to me, this game fell way, way short of my expectations. Certainly better than Grand Theft Auto 4, because Grand Theft Auto 4 was a monstrous disaster, in my opinion. But, I mean, in the context of Grand Theft Auto 4, this is certainly a step in the right direction, but it's still far, far removed from San Andreas of 2004. Yep.
This has been a presentation of Honey Sound Broadcasting, an affiliate of the Bilko Media Network.